Hello, and welcome to the Audible Local Ledger. This is Elliot. On Thursday, a frigid January 16th in the new year, the board in Chatham has endorsed the Center for Active Living, CFAL, renovation plan. The community center would share space during the construction. By Alan Pollock. The Select Board has voted to support a plan to renovate and slightly expand the Center for Active Living at 193 Stony Hill Road and will bring the matter before the voters in the May annual town meeting. Would find it slightly larger and without the central lally column that limited the room's use. Above that room, the median lounge would be enlarged with a shed dormer, a strategy that would also enlarge a meeting room and other space upstairs. In the basement's large meeting room, the central lally column would also be removed to improve visibility and usability. The site plan proposed by Raber showed 47 parking spaces, including new accessible parking spaces near the front entrance. As currently configured, the CFAL has 22 parking spaces. The project total cost for the project, including construction expenses, design work, contingency funds, and 1 year's projected cost escalation, is set at $4.5 million, which represents an all-in project budget, Raber told the Select Board. Community Services Director Leah Lacrosse said CFAL's programs are serving more people than they did in the past, requiring more staff and additional space. Raber's design uses a thoughtful approach to maximize space in the existing building and results in a beautifully renovated space to accommodate Riders Cove Respite Adult Day program on the lower level. Increasing the occupancy level of various rooms will eliminate the need for waiting lists for some CFAL programs and events, she added. Lunches and other programs at the center are important parts of the clients' lives, Lacrosse noted. Many share how we've given them a reason to get up in the morning, she said. While Raber said it would be possible to do the construction in phases to allow most programs to continue in the building while work is being carried out, the best way, the safest way, is to essentially vacate the building for the 9 months required for construction. That timeline is, with the right contractor, very doable, he said. Lacrosse said the town has a plan to locate some CFAL programs at the community center during those 9 months. Is that going to impact programs in the community center? Select Board member Dean Nicastro asked. Make no mistake, it's going to be very tight in there, Lacrosse said. But Recreation and Beaches Director Amy Howell said she believes the community center can accommodate most CFAL programs, though it will impact the way the facility runs. But it's expected. We're moving 2 buildings into one, she said. There's just going to have to be a lot of flexibility on our end, on their end, and on the community's end. The plan calls for 1 room in the community center to be reserved for the use by the Adult Day program and for the CFAL to move out in time to make way the Recreations Division's youth summer program that starts in mid-June. Lacrosse said some of CFAL's programs will likely need to be cut back somewhat during the construction, but all of its services should remain intact. The projected price tag of $4.67 million is preliminary. A more refined cost estimate would come after the detailed designs are prepared and reviewed. The ultimate cost will be known only after contractors bid on the project. Board member Shireen Davis asked how the cost would be affected by any tariffs imposed by the incoming Trump administration. In a typical home, about 20% of the building products come from abroad, Raber said. If the same is true for a project like this, the impact would be significant. I think everybody is hoping that common sense prevails when it comes to the nation's trade policies, he said. Hopefully, if tariffs happen, it will be modest. Acknowledging that there are a number of other unknowns in the project, Select Board member Dean Nicastro said Tuesday he supports advancing a more conservative price estimate of $5 million. Town manager Jill Goldsmith said has said it would be impossible to pay the entire amount using the town's free cash account, which is unusually large this year. Doing so would prevent the need for borrowing and would be able to pass town meeting with a simple majority vote rather than the two-thirds required for borrowing. That threshold proved to be the biggest impediment in gaining approval for a new CFL in West Chatham. And a quick note here, I'm sorry if I misquoted. Jill Goldsmith said that it would be possible to use the free money. The Select Board has not yet endorsed any particular strategy for funding the project, but plan to discuss it at next week's meeting. All 5 members of the Select Board endorsed the CFL project at this week's meeting. We've been at this a very, very long time, Board Member Corey Metter said, acknowledging that some members preferred building a new CFL instead of renovating the existing one. Metter said that this plan may not represent the storybook ending that some people would like to see, but it represents a responsible plan for meeting the needs of the community. Man Eternally Grateful to Survive Hiking Accident by Alan Pollock. Bleeding from cuts on his arm, suffering from a smashed leg and foot, and dangling from a helicopter over a deep cactus-filled ravine, Steve Koppel didn't have time to reflect on what caused him to slip and fall. But he knows that if not for luck, instinct, or divine intervention, his Arizona vacation trek could have easily claimed his life. A Brewster resident and photographer who owns a gallery in Chatham, Koppel left on the day after Christmas for a getaway with his wife Paula at a resort in the Catalina foothills near Tucson. They signed up for an off-site hike led by 2 experienced guides on the Finger Rock Trail, a trek Koppel and his wife enjoyed last year. So I knew it wasn't anything out of our abilities, he said. Physically fit at 64, Koppel knew the climb would be strenuous, but it wasn't a dangerous hike or anything. There were no technical skills needed, he said. There was nothing not safe about this. 2.5 miles later, they reached the top of the climb and paused to have lunch and to rehydrate. It wasn't a particularly precarious spot, Koppel recalled. I have a fear of heights, so I don't go near the edges of cliffs or anything, he said, and yet Koppel made a misstep, stumbled on a rock, and before I knew it, I was tumbling backwards on a rocky, cactus-filled slope. The gorge is several hundred feet deep, but Koppel managed to stop himself about 40 feet down. The guide told me this is almost like I was trained how to fall because I was protecting my head and neck with my arms, he said. That instinctual action likely kept Koppel from striking his head, allowing him to remain conscious and stop his descent. Had he sustained a head injury, it would have been a very different result because I would have ended up at the bottom, Koppel said. Trained in first aid, the guides climbed to Koppel's location, stabilized him, and braced him, allowing him to slowly edge his way back up to the trail. From there, it was clear I wasn't going to be able to walk, he said. The guides called 911, which triggered a team response by the local sheriff's office and the nonprofit search and rescue group Southern Arizona Rescue Association. In Arizona especially, the rescue organizations are amazing, Koppel said. The team dispatched a crew of 8 people to climb the mountain with various kinds of rescue equipment, even as a rescue helicopter was scrambled. Both approaches were necessary since chopper rescues can be made impossible by the terrain, weather, or other factors. In such a case, rescuers estimated it would take around 30 people working in shifts to carry Koppel down the mountain, an 8-hour job. Waiting for rescuers to arrive was difficult, but I was in good hands, he recalled. After an hour and a half, the helicopter arrived, and the pilot decided that it would be safe to hoist Koppel to safety. One rescuer descended from the helicopter in a rescue sling and moved Koppel to the sling for his ascent. But what about Koppel's fears of heights? There simply wasn't time to be afraid, he said with a chuckle. Staying on the ground wasn't a viable option. He was told he probably wouldn't spin on the solo hoist up the aircraft, but that if he did, he should close his eyes and look downward. Actually, the trip up was quick and straightforward, as shown in the video taken by those on the ground. In the moment, I felt such relief that I'd been rescued and I would be safe, so that my normal fear of heights didn't come into play, Copel said. The helicopter shuttled him to a local hospital where he received excellent care, and after a couple days' rest at the resort to prepare him for the plane trip, he was back on his way to the Cape. Copel and his wife are now based safely at home, where he's recuperating nicely from a fractured tibia and ankle, and plenty of cuts and bruises. But nothing else serious. Miraculously, he said, I am eternally grateful and thankful because this is a reminder of living each day to the max. I have no idea how I fell. I replay it over and over in my mind. It was quite an experience for a man who's never broken a bone before. Nor have I had a helicopter ride equipped. Copel made a sizable donation to the rescue group, partially to thank the volunteers who came to his aid, and partly support the rescue efforts of other people in the future. Here on the Cape, he's also grateful for friends, customers, and business associates who have come to his house to offer help. The whole Cape Cod community has been very supportive and caring, checking on me, he said. Will Copel hype again? Time will tell, he says. Even if such a small misstep, which he can't even remember, put his life in jeopardy, it's not a decision to be made lightly. While he has no regrets about making the climb, the accident was potentially life-changing. Someone or something was watching over me, Copel said. Page 2, Spotlight on Lower Cape Personalities and Visionaries. Brewster's Harkinson named BCT Volunteer of the Year by Brad Doyle. After vacationing in Brewster for decades, Dan Harkinson and his wife Carolyn McCarley finally made the move full-time in 2021. Although Harkinson had established a love for the beach, his roots were in the woods of New Hampshire, where he worked as a lawyer for more than 4 decades and enjoyed working on a small woodland lot that he shared with his siblings. Harkinson has channeled his passion for the woodlands while volunteering as a property steward and a monitor for the Brewster Conservation Trust, and in September he was named BCT's Volunteer of the Year. One of the benefits of doing this work is when you're vacationing here in the summer, you tend to be beach-focused, Harkinson said. The properties I'm monitoring are all in the woodlands, and I've gotten far more familiar with the woods of Brewster than before I moved here. You get to see a lot. The 72-year-old Harkinson sent a record of monitoring 25 BCT properties in 2024, ranging from small quarter-acre lots to larger properties that span 6 or 7 acres. His primary focus is to monitor the property for encroachment from neighbors and to make sure trails aren't being set up and yard waste isn't being dumped. He pulls invasive plants, trims roots so trails are more manageable, and mulches various sites. It's the kind of mindless but important work that a retired guy can enjoy, Harkinson said. It's relatively rare that you find a problem. There are occasional trash indications that abutters have probably simply mistaken that they could dump their yard waste in a certain location, but it's not their property. Most of the time, it's pretty uneventful. You walk around and you submit a report. That's it. Harkinson and other BCT volunteers, ranging from 3 to upwards of a dozen, typically work 1 day per week depending on the weather and season. He visits most properties once a year, though some require additional visits. The work varies over the seasons, he said. I expect fairly soon there may be some brush to burn because it's a brush burning season. Pulling and trimming invasives you can do almost any time, and the monitoring work you're self-scheduled. While Harkinson appreciates the solitude and beauty of Brewster's woodlands, he's also grateful for the opportunity to work alongside like-minded people who are motivated to maintain the town's aesthetic. You work with really nice people who are all committed to try and keep Brewster rural, trying to maintain the character of the town, and trying to protect the woodlands, he said. There are a lot of volunteers, and I'm no more worthy of the award than the many people I work with and over the course of the year. It's a great group of men and women that get together and try to make things a little better for everybody. Swap shops fulfill many purposes. Only one is open year-round, however, by Tim Wood. Swap shop, treasure chest, gift house. For, for many local residents, these are the places that represent the ultimate in recycling, where useful things can be passed on and find new life in a new home. Books, furniture, bicycles, clothing, housewares, all could be found in various conditions and in degrees of usefulness at a price that can't be beat. Each town has its own version, some more functional or sophisticated than others, located at transfer stations, usually near the recycling area. Each accomplishes several goals: keeping usable items out of the solid waste stream, saving people money by providing things that they need at no cost, and serving as a social club hub for regulars. All operate basically the same, although each has different rules and criteria for what is and or isn't accepted. People drop off clean, reusable items. People who need them or want them take them away. Books are big, as are games, children's toys, and clothing. Swap shops fulfill the reuse function in reduce, reuse, and recycle. However, swap shops aren't open year-round in most towns and are open only to residents. That can leave a homeowner hanging on a usable item for months if they can't find someone else to donate it. In Chatham's case, the swap shop at the Sam Ryder Road transfer station is open from about mid-May to early October, with those dates depending on the availability of volunteers. Officials say the fact that the two sheds used in the exchange operation are not heated limited the times that can be used, with a lack of volunteers further restricting when they can be open. Harwich's Treasure Chest is the only swap operation in the four-town area that's open year-round. Open Saturdays and Sundays from 9 to 3 p.m. Access requires a resident or special treasure chest sticker. That wasn't always the case. At one time, the treasure chest was open to anyone, but that changed several years ago after a series of confrontations and a decision to limit access to Harwich residents rather than get stuck with things brought in from out of town. If not taken by someone, those items would have to be disposed of on the town's dime. The gift house at the Orleans transfer station is open Friday through Monday from 10 to 2 p.m. This year it's closed December 4th, and will reopen in March. According to Deputy Director of Public Works and Natural Resources Calvin Sutton, the town has to prioritize resources during the colder weather to promote public safety and reduce traffic at the facility. The Orleans facility had 3 buildings, one of which is heated. There are about 35 volunteers, 4 per shift, who screen items. While Gift House takes some items out of solid waste stream, many can still be recycled when it's closed, Sutton wrote in an email. This allows us to maintain responsible waste handling in the absence of the Gift House, he wrote. Brewster's Swap Shop is open from April through December. While the building has a wood stove, it's difficult to keep it warm in low temperatures, Assistant Town Manager Donna Kalinick wrote in an email. She echoed Sutton's comments about needing to devote resources where most needed during the winter. Brewster has a robust volunteer base, she said, with more than 20 residents keeping the shop open Friday to Monday from 10 to 2 p.m. during the season. Like most swap shops on the Cape, it is a very popular town location, she wrote. From May to October, Chatham's Swap Shop is open Friday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's a small, fewer than half a dozen, but dedicated volunteer group who keep the place running. Longtime volunteer Richie Hall said the 4-hour shifts he works on Saturdays are endlessly fascinating, and for the most part, the volunteers who screen and sort items have positive experiences. I would never have known a lot of people I've come to know if I hadn't spent 4 hours a day there every Saturday, he said. I'm grateful for that. As in most towns, the swap shop attracts residents from all segments of the community. It's a wonderful cross-section of Chatham life, he said. There's no other place in town that you can see what you see at the dump. Chatham Swap Shop also attracts items you might not see in other towns. Someone once dropped off 2 cellos and a clarinet towards the end of his shift, and rather than let them possibly be damaged by remaining out in the weather, he and his wife took them home and donated them to a musical instrument repository at Nauset High School. It's nice to do this in an affluent town, I have to say, Hall commented. Every now and then there are nice things you can do. There are also the times when spats flare up or odd items come up, like the garden gnome that had a nest of mice, he said. The small size of the sheds, which requires that many items be kept outdoors, as well as the lack of electricity and heat, limits the time of year it can be opened, said Public Works Director Rob Falley. Hall thinks the volunteers could be found to keep it open longer, especially given the warmer fall temperatures in the region has been experiencing for the last several years. If voters approve funding for the second phase of the transfer station overhaul and May's annual town meeting, the swap shop will get a new building, Falley said. It will be also relocated closer to the Sam Ryder Road transfer station entrance so that users don't have to drive through the recycling area to access it. Whether that means it could be open longer is uncertain. We recommend residents hold onto any items they want to donate until the swap shop opens again in the spring. Falley said in an email, if they don't have the space or felt they need to be part with the item sooner, they should take advantage of the many other options to donate items, including local churches or other donation centers. Planning in progress for Orleans Pride weekend parade programming planned for mid-June by Ryan Bray. June is recognized around the world as Pride Month. This year, planning is underway to bring celebrations of queer and LGBTQ plus culture closer to the Lower Cape. The Select Board last week gave its support to plans for Pride Weekend to be held in Orleans June 13th and 14th. Rick Francolini, one of the event's organizers, said he envisions educational programming and entertainment as well as a Pride Parade on June 14th. I was thrilled with the town's response, Francolini said, after making his pitch to the board in its January 8th meeting. I felt that the board was extremely supportive. The weekend is being planned so as not to interfere with other events being held on the Lower and Outer Cape in June, including Provincetown's own Pride Month celebrations. Francolini said he and his wife Joan began working with others in July to bring a Pride Month celebration to town. The couple were motivated in larger part by their daughter, who is bisexual and engaged to a transgender male. She said boyfriends and girlfriends throughout the years, Francolini said. We've been super supportive and we have a great loving relationship that we're proud of. A kickoff Zoom meeting in December garnered 36 participants, Francolini said, convincing organizers that there's enough support locally to proceed with planning the event. Organizers are in discussion with the Cape Rep Theater in Brewster about using the venue to stage an afternoon of programming as part of the weekend, Francolini said. That could include an informational panel led by Rick Kuntz, host of P-Flag, Cape Cod's Profiles in LGBTQ plus Courage podcast series, as well as entertainment, including music, poetry, and stories. Some family-friendly drag, perhaps, Francolini said after the Select Board meeting. But there will be an afternoon of programming. The Orleans Council on Aging annual Pride Barbecue could also be folded into the festivities as June 13th kickoff, he said. But the main attraction of the proposed Pride weekend will be the June 14th parade. Francolini said he envisioned a small gathering similar to the town's annual holiday stroll, where participants will gather downtown, perhaps at the Village Green, and proceed up Main Street towards Old Colony Way. While organizers envisioned a late morning parade that would wrap up by noon, town manager Kim Newman suggested a nighttime parade. Holding the event later would help avoid potential conflicts with other events held during the day, including the Orleans Farmers Market. She said there would also be opportunity to more broadly support local restaurants and businesses with an evening parade. That time period, people could come in and go out to dinner and stay out, she said. You could find an anchor potentially in one of the businesses downtown that could host an event. Part of the objective of the inaugural Pride weekend is to help further normalize the LGBTQ plus and queer culture by bringing events into smaller communities. The Orleans Council on Aging's annual Pride Barbecue could also be folded into the festivities as a June 13th kickoff, he said. But the main attraction of the proposed Pride weekend will be the June 14th parade. Francolini said he envisioned a small gathering similar to the town's annual holiday stroll, where participants will gather downtown, perhaps at the village green, and proceed up Main Street towards Old Colony Way. While organizers envisioned a late morning parade that would wrap up by noon, town manager Kim Newman suggested a nighttime parade. That time period, people could come in and go to dinner and stay out. You could find an anchor potentially in one of the businesses downtown that could host the event. Part of the objective of the inaugural Pride weekend is to help further normalize LGBTQ plus and queer communities by bringing events into smaller communities. Provincetown has long been celebrated for its promotion of gay culture, but Francolini said that such celebrations shouldn't be relegated to any one city or town. What I've learned from my daughter and her fiancé is that small town prides are emerging more and more, he said. They're extremely important because they create welcoming environments and they create opportunities, which is critical. And while the primary goal of the weekend is promoting acceptance for members of the LGBTQ plus community locally, Francolini said there's much to be gained by more broadly by the entire Lower Cape community. For the most part, we have an older population, and yes, we have queer members of that population, but we also have straight members of the population who are wrestling with grandchildren that are non-binary or transgender, who are figuring it out. Organizers plan to privately finance the weekend's events, which Francolini estimates will cost a few $1,000s. In-kind donations are already coming in, he said, and a group has applied for a $1,000 grant from Cape Cod 5. But in order to qualify for a grant, Francolini said a financial agent is needed to support it. He said there have been conversations with Nauset Interfaith Association and the nonprofit Prouder Together about having them serve in that capacity. Andrea Reed of the Select Board said that the Orleans Cultural Council and the Orleans Cultural District also might have grant money available for supporting local events. You're doing an economic development in all of our partnering towns, said Andrea Reed of the Select Board. You're extending the shoulder season. You're giving people a reason to come and stay, and you're using the arts to make this happen. So this is a win-win to me. Frankly, said the pending change in the White House has ramped up the urgency around organizers and LGBTQ plus advocates. Specifically, he said members of the transgender community need allyship and support. There's a community right now that is finding itself vilified through a tremendous amount of misinformation, he said. The gay and lesbian community of 20 and 30 years ago was in a very similar space. Conversion therapy was seen as a solution. They were ostracized and marginalized. They've come a tremendously long way, which is satisfying and gratifying, but you can't afford to become complacent. Newman and members of the Select Board said they saw great potential for growing the event from year to year, which makes ironing out the specifics in year one all the more important. We want this, and we want this to be successful, said Kevin Galligan of the Select Board. But let's start easy, early, and begin. As Kim said, I think this can be a really great event that can grow in future years, but let's make sure each year we're building, listening, and that there are lessons learned. Mass GOP calls for Flanagan to resign amid federal investigation by Mackenzie Blue. State Representative Chris Flanagan was sworn in on January 1st for his second consecutive term amid an ongoing federal investigation into fraud allegations that started in September. On January 7th, the Massachusetts Republican Party released a statement calling for Flanagan's resignation. Representative Flanagan has repeatedly misled the public and violated campaign finance laws, as documented by the Massachusetts Office of Campaign and Political Finance, said Amy Carnival, Mass GOP chair. His pattern of illegal actions has escalated to the point of federal scrutiny. This is not a partisan issue. It's about restoring trust in our elected officials. Representative Flanagan must resign immediately to uphold the integrity of the office he holds. The release urged the legislature's Democratic supermajority to expel Flanagan from office in the event he refuses to resign. The GOP group likened the situation to that of former state representative Carlos Henriquez, who was expelled after he was sentenced to 6 months in prison after a domestic battery charge. The group said lawmakers should not wait until there's a conviction this time around. On September 20th, Officer Paulo Cruz of the Yarmouth Police Department responded to a call for a past fraud. In a heavily redacted report, the officer describes a conversation between himself and the reporting party identifying Flanagan's alleged fraudulent activity. The offense was reported as a federal larceny of over $1,200. According to the report, inconsistencies were prevalent when Flanagan used a business account to issue checks written to himself and several withdrawals totaling about $36,000. On a separate section of the report labeled Other Properties, an amount of $26,500 was listed as stolen. In April, the OCPF sent Flanagan a public resolution letter regarding a complaint received concerning a fraudulent mailer. The review found merit in the complaint, along with failure to comply with Massachusetts campaign finance laws and obstruction of the investigation. Prior to the 2022 race for first Barnstable District State Representative, the Democratic Candidates Committee sent out a mailer signed from the Conservatives for Dennis without filing a disclosure. The OCPF was also conducted an extensive review of the committee's financial activity and concluded that Flanagan and his campaign did not comply with the Massachusetts campaign finance law. During the investigation, Flanagan posed under the alias Jane Louise to conceal his financial role in the creation of a mailer in support of his election, according to the letter. Flanagan resigned from his executive position with the nonprofit Home Builders and Remodel Association of Cape Cod, effectively May 10th. Shortly after the Yarmouth Police completed its report, the investigation was passed on to the Barnstable Police Department, which declined to comment about the ongoing investigation. On January 3rd, the Barnstable Police Department issued a press release stating that the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts had taken on the investigation. Flanagan and his campaign are under investigation for alleged potential criminal activity, and according to the Office of the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney, the investigation is still ongoing with no formal charges issued at this time. Calls to Flanagan's office for comment were not returned. Today's obituaries. Priscilla Barr passed away peacefully on January 6th at Keystone Place, Buzzard Bay. She'd been a longtime resident of Orleans. She was born in Newburgh, New York on December 15, 1938. She's predeceased by her mother, her father, and her husband, Edwin. She leaves her sister, daughter, her husband, a son and his wife, a daughter and her husband. She also leaves 7 grandchildren and 1 great-grandson. She found so much joy in her role as their grandee. Priscilla was blessed with the love of family, strong relationships, strong friendships, a passion for living, running, tennis, and dancing. She supported her community through many volunteer efforts and her gift of kindness towards everyone she encountered. The family is very grateful for the caring staff at Keystone Place and the Beacon Hospice team that showed compassion in the care of Priscilla's end-of-life journey. There will be a family graveside service in the spring. Jean Humphrey Brown, 92, of Harwich, formerly of North Quincy, passed away on Sunday, December 29th, surrounded by her family. She was a beloved mother, husband Ingrid Leonard of Eastham, and of Elaine Brown of Harwich and her husband Peter. She was the proud grandmother of Brian and his wife, and also great-grandmother. She was also aunt to many nieces and nephews. Jean was predeceased by the love of her life, Thomas Brown, with whom she shared 35 years of marriage, beloved son Thomas Brown Jr., and grandsons Christopher. Jean cherished time with family, being in nature, feeding the birds, tending to her garden, basking in sunshine, and chasing sunsets and moonrises. She knew how to celebrate life, embracing moments to share laughter and adventure. An avid reader who stayed up to date on current events, she was especially keen on keeping up with the news of her loved ones. She was a wonderful listener, generous with comforting words, advice, prayer, and insights. Jean was a devoted, kind, and thoughtful mother, grandmama, great-grandmama, aunt, and friend. Her deep faith, wisdom, and love were an inspiration to all who knew her, and she will be missed dearly. Jeffrey Kent Nelson of Harwich died on January 10th after a sudden medical event. He was 80. The oldest of three children, he was born in Hartford, Connecticut, but grew up in Colesville, Maryland. He graduated from St. Anselm's Abbey School at the Benedict Priory in Washington, D.C., where he was on a championship basketball team. Majoring in English, he graduated from Wesleyan University, Middletown. He taught third grade for 2 years at Landon School in Bethesda. A student's parent was U.S. Assistant Attorney General Don Dorr, who recruited Jeff in 1968 to move to Brooklyn and teach non-readers at IS 55 Ocean Hill, Brownsville, as part of the Robert F. Kennedy's legacy through the Ford Foundation-funded Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation. This was a time of political controversy about community control of education. Jeff trained with Jean Piaget's disciple, Dr. Caleb Gaetano, to learn words and color method of teaching reading, writing, and spelling to support the educational effort. In 1972, seeking a retreat from such intense work, Jeff and his wife Marietta relocated to her peaceful Cape Cod hometown of Harwich. Jeff planned to write a book and get a graduate degree in education. Her parents insisted he needed to have a job. The day before school started, he applied at Dennis Yarmouth Schools to be a substitute teacher. He was hired on the spot for a full-time position at Wixon Middle School, where he remained for 12 years. Jeff left Wixon after he authored the middle school language arts textbook, Grammar and Composition. He was an early user of the Apple computer, drawn to creating educational software. He was on the team that developed the Bank Street Writer, funded by Bank Street College of Education in New York. The software is a student-friendly word processor, innovative in 1981 because instructions displayed on the student's computer screen at all times. In 1990, Jeff returned to classroom teaching at Harwich Middle School. He also served on the Harwich School Committee as a pioneer advocate for public funding for both computer equipment and education. Next, he worked in the Boston area computer industry as a technical writer at Cognix, a leader in vision for industry factory automation software. His passion for the English language characterized his whole life, from teaching, reading, and writing to creating light verse and puns. He was self-appointed head of the Apostrophe Police. He edited countless documents for his children and then grandchildren, including this fall for his grandson William's college essays. He pursued his love of art, honing a quirky cartoon style to capture daily life. He doted on his grandchildren, who called him Buppa. The three kids still know him as Duckman because he can talk like Donald Duck. He and Marietta raised 3 children in Lexington, Mass., and his Harwich next-door neighbor. He leaves 3 grandchildren, brothers, nieces, nephews, and several cousins. David Henderson, 79, of Harwich, died peacefully in his home on January 6, surrounded by his loving family after a long struggle with dementia. He was born on June 9, 1945, in Plymouth. He was the son of James Russell and Ruth Henderson. David was a graduate of Marshfield High School, where he was a standout football and baseball athlete. He continued his education at the University of New Hampshire, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Management in 1967. After graduation, he married the love of his life, Mary. They were married for 57 years. David enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he was stationed in Eschborn, Germany. He served a 2-year tour of duty from 1967 to 1969. David and Mary welcomed their firstborn son, Kevin, in Germany. He returned to the States and began teaching science and coaching football and baseball in Windsor, Vermont. After their second son, Christopher, was born in Hanover, New Hampshire, they relocated to Cape Cod. David was a Chatham Public School teacher, where he taught 7th and 8th grade science for 10 years, as well as coaching soccer and baseball. He and his wife, Mary, welcomed their third child, Elizabeth, in 1977. David and Mary founded Mid-Cape Pest Control together in 1982, which is still a thriving local business after 42 years. He is a respected member of his profession and community. Beyond his professional accomplishments, David was a devoted family man who loved his wife, children, and grandchildren above all else. He was a beloved husband and devoted father. In his free time, David enjoyed fishing and clamming in the summer months in Cape Cod and the Cape Cod Salties. He also loved hunting, where he traveled all over the country with hunting excursions and was a member of the Safari Club International. His golf game brought him joy and relaxation. He was a member of the Cranberry Valley Golf Course in Harwich for 25 years. He played a round of golf every day that the course was open. David enjoyed traveling with his wife Mary. They especially liked to travel to Bermuda, where they had been able to visit numerous times since they first honeymooned in 1967. David is survived by his wife, his 3 children, and their spouses. 8 grandchildren. He is also survived by his siblings, as well as numerous nieces, nephews, cousins, and friends. He is also survived by his favorite 4-legged companion, Scout. John Henry Anthony Rossetti, 85, died peacefully at his home in Harwich on January 9th after a battle with cancer. John was born in West Roxbury. He attended Boston College High School and graduated from Boston College in 1961. In 1964, he obtained a master's in education and taught high school in Massachusetts schools before he moved to Baghdad, Iraq in 1966, where he taught English as a lead teacher in the Jesuit-run Al-Hikma University during the 1966-67 academic year. Due to political volatility in the Middle East, he was obliged to return after only 1 year. Following his return to Massachusetts, he worked for 25 years in healthcare administration, including at Boston City Hospital, now Boston Medical Center, and other health facilities in the area. In his early 50s, he entered the Somerville School of Nursing and graduated with a nursing degree. He then worked as a registered nurse at Medfield State Hospital and private facilities for several years. After retiring, he and his wife moved to Harwich in 2009. For a number of years, he served as a member of the Dover Historical Commission and Dover Conservation Commission in Dover, as well as member of the Harwich Conservation Commission in Harwich. He enjoyed a number of hobbies and interests. He loved to work outdoors and tend a flourishing backyard garden. He was also a talented painter of landscapes, a passion he found time to develop in his retirement. He loved crossword puzzles, genealogical research, and fine dining. His time in Iraq stimulated a lifelong love of international travel from the Middle East to South America and Europe. He particularly loved visiting Ireland, where his maternal roots were, as well as Italy. He was a loving son, brother, husband, father, and grandfather, who was devoted to his family. John is survived by his wife Mary, his older son, his wife and grandson, his daughter, her husband, and granddaughters. He was predeceased by his sister. Margaret Jane Fennell was called home in her sleep on January 11th in Harwich, where she had lived and raised a family for 63 years. She was Peggy Jane to her friends, PJ to her family, Grandma PJ to her grandchildren, and Gigi to her great-grandchildren. PJ was born in Weymouth, December 19, 1941, and raised in Hingham for 18 years. There she was a talented equestrian show jumper. In 1959, she moved to Harwich, where she finished her senior year in high school and met the love of her life, Norman Albert Fennell. She worked for many years as a clerk at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds in Barnstable, where she had a knack for finding historical records. In later years, she was an avid reader, crossworder, and picture puzzler, and started each day with them to keep her mind sharp. Each spring, she adorned her back deck with bountiful planters of hanging flowers and bird feeders that enticed an amazingly colorful array of local birds. She was an accomplished cross-stitcher and glass beater. She would spend months cross-stitching detailed Christmas stockings and beautiful Christmas ornaments from glass beads for grand and great-grandchildren. PJ is predeceased by her parents, her loving husband, Norman Fennell, former police chief for the town of Harwich, who was taken from us far too early, and her dear sister. PJ is survived by her 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and numerous beloved great-grandchildren, and numerous beloved cousins, nieces, and nephews. Edward Joseph Mahoney of Chatham passed away peacefully at his home, surrounded by his family, November 22nd. He was the devoted husband of Barbara Mahoney, who predeceased him in 2015 after 16 years of loving and joyous marriage. Ed was born to Catherine and George Mahoney in Waltham on March 24, 1928. He grew up with modest means alongside his sister Georgina. He never forgot his roots or valued his Scottish and Irish heritage, as well as his Nova Scotia roots. His spirit, curiosity, humor, faith, and unwavering support from his mother, sister, teachers, friends, extended family, including the Yorstons, and his Barbara, helped him succeed in life and love with remarkable optimism and generosity. He taught by example. Ed met Barbara in 5th grade, and they were friends through school years. He was like a big brother to her siblings. He graduated from St. Charles High School in 1944. Ed proudly served our country in World War II in the United States Marine Corps. He and Barbara married. He attended Boston College and raised their 5 children in Waltham, Sudbury, Chatham, and Cary, Illinois. Though, through these years, they built a cottage in Chatham, which they eventually insulated and retired to. A diagnosis of ALS for Barbara was extremely challenging, yet they persevered together with love, strength, and even humor. Ed learned all aspects of caring for his wife and did so for many years. Ed enjoyed Cape Cod old-time softball, his kids' hockey and activities, traveling, history, helping people, and especially being with all generations of his relatives and lifelong friends. Besides Barbara, his sister, and parents, Ed was predeceased by his grandsons. He's survived by his children, grandchildren, and who will miss his jokes and stories. His 9 beloved great-grandchildren, nieces, nephews, neighbors, and friends in New England, Florida, the Midwest, Nova Scotia, and Scotland, who will all miss him. Eric Lee Riley of Chatham and Brooklyn, New York, died peacefully in his New York home on January 6th, with his soulmate and husband of 44 years, Gregory Heil, by his side. Eric valiantly battled but ultimately passed away due to pancreatic cancer. Ed was born in Albion, Michigan, attending the University of Michigan, and came to New York City to pursue a career in musical theater. He subsequently spent years on and off Broadway and working in theaters around the globe. On Broadway, Eric starred in shows such as Ain't Misbehavin', Dreamgirls, and was the original Papa G in Tony-nominated Once on This Island and A Christmas Carol at Madison Square Garden. He toured in the Broadway productions of A Chorus Line, Hair, The King and I, Legends, and many other national and international theatrical productions. Eric was also an extraordinary director and choreographer. A directorial highlight of his career was production of the smash off-Broadway hit musical Little Ham, written by Langston Hughes. Eric and his husband Greg bought a home in Chatham in 2002 and spent most of the year there, but wintered on the island of Vieques, Puerto Rico since 1998. Whether in the New York theatrical community, Chatham, or Vieques, Eric's magnetic personality and undeniable talent served as a galvanizing force in all of these communities. He will always be an inspiration for those he mentored, taught, or directed. As an African-American artist on the Broadway stage, he served as an inspiration for a generation of performers, hoping to emulate his journey, marked by his determination, boundless creativity, and vision. Eric has been a proud member of Actors Equity Association, the Stage and Directors and Stage Choreographers Union, and the Street Actors Guild. Eric is the son of the late Sherry and Patricia Riley, both of Battle Creek, Michigan. In addition to his husband Greg, Eric is survived by his 2 sisters, his son Brian, 4 grandsons, several aunts, cousins, in-laws, and very close friends. He will be loved by all forever. Monomoy responds to middle school mold concerns by Ellen Pollock. In the wake of concerns raised by staff and parents, school officials are redoubling their efforts to identify mold at Monomoy Regional Middle School to improve communication about the problem and prevent new moisture damage in the building. Speaking at last week's school committee meeting, District Business Manager Michael McMillan thanked the parents for pressing the district for action and improved transparency. Their engagement only improves our eventual outcomes, he told the committee. He said the district has assembled a new school building committee that will oversee the replacement of the roof and siding of the building, along with other potential steps needed to keep water from infiltrating. The results of mold tests have been posted online, and plans are underway to do comprehensive testing at various locations around the middle school, he said. State and federal agencies actually do not recommend testing, McMillan said, since a visual inspection often suffices. Whether or not you find mold, if you have moisture, you should fix it, he said. The challenge is when the mold might be present inside walls, and contractors will be spot checking various new locations to look for evidence of mold. Contractors working for the district have mostly tested for mold with other surface contaminants, since air testing can be an imperfect measure, McMillan said. It can be influenced by someone opening a window in the next room, he said, but air sampling that has been done shows that sometimes mold levels indoors are greater than the ambient levels outside, and sometimes the indoor air quality is better than outdoors. Black mold identified on 2 ceiling tiles during the summer was traced to moisture from a mini split air conditioner. Those tiles were removed, the area was intensively cleaned and retested, and the results were good. Generally, the air quality tests paint a mixed mixture, McMillan said. This data does not suggest that it's unsafe for students to be in the school. It doesn't mean we have no problems, he said. We will continue to work on this. Specifically, the school has removed mold where it was detected and stepped up targeting cleaning efforts. It holds regular meetings with staff representatives to hear concerns, and a number of things we've done have come from these meetings, like the use of air purifiers, McMillan said. The main effort is focused on fixing water intrusion through the aging siding and a leaky roof, which is the work of the building committee. We're looking at whether or not we should be expanding that to include the replacement of windows, because we know that they're a real key weakness in terms of the building envelope, he said. In fact, in the next decade, the middle school will not only need a new roof and siding, but also new boilers, HVAC equipment, and doors. It's going to be an expensive project for 10 years. Is that going to be more expensive than building a new school? That's the discussion we've been started having with the school building committee, McMillan said. Asked by a school committee member whether there was any evidence linking particular students or staff members' illness to mold, McMillan said there often is not. That is the crux of the issue, he said. When a person complains about mold or becomes ill, the school focuses on the room where the person spends the most time and doesn't always find evidence of a problem. In cases like that, the area is so cleaned and repaired, doing all the things you should do if there's a problem, McMillan said. In a letter read to the committee, parent Courtney Wittenstein asked for an improved communication, immediate air testing, and the creation of a mold task force that represents parents, faculty members, school committees members, and an expert on mold. The school committee did not take up discussion of Wittenstein's recommendation task force, but officially created the building committee, which has representatives who are parents, faculty members, and building construction experts. While the building committee will be focused on the middle school work, it may have other jobs on the horizon, Superintendent Scott Carpenter said. I imagine that in the not-too-distant future, many of the conversations we're having at the middle school, we're going to need to be having at Chatham Elementary School, which was renovated at around the same time, he said. School committee member Brad Schiff asked about the time frame for the next round of mold testing at the middle school. McMillan said a plan needs to be developed about how many samples will be taken, noting that the more extensive the sampling, the longer the process will take. He said he hopes testing will take place in the next few weeks and the results will be made available as quickly as possible. One of the concerns of the parents is communicating as we go along here, Schiff said. That's what's going to be the best way to communicate the results of those tests, he asked. McMillan said information is likely to come both from the school building and from staff. I definitely think we need to improve our communication, he said. Orleans misses out on library grant. Trustee Library of Advocates Planning Next Steps by Ryan Bray. A state grant from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners said that would have covered a significant portion of the cost of building a new Snow Library will not be awarded to the town. Members of the Snow Library Board of Trustees learned January 7th that their grant application which was submitted for consideration in May, was not accepted for funding. It was a brief phone call to our director, Tavi Prugno, to Trustees Chair James Balliet. He said that the town received a low score on the economic analysis portion of the review. During the Select Board's January 8th meeting, member Kevin Galligan was more pointed in his comments. The community was viewed and scored as an affluent community, he said. Galligan said the town's application was otherwise looked upon favorably in a number of other areas, including design, need, and support in the community. It's from the governor's office, Balliet said of the grant, and they're very, very big right now on making sure that investments are being made in communities that haven't necessarily gotten investments in the past. The current Snow Library was built in 1952 and last renovated in 1992, but the library's needs have outgrown the building, which has been plagued by structural issues in recent years. We need a library that has enough parking so people don't turn away when they pull into the lot, Balliet said. We need a library that doesn't leak. Our roof has leaked 12 times in 5 years. Working with Odin's Elo Architecture of Boston, the trustees see the opportunity of building a new 24,000 square foot library at its current 67 Main Street location. A new library would provide more parking and additional space for meeting and other forms of community programming. But without the grant, trustees will need to find other ways of financing the cost of the project's design and construction. Balliet said that will involve private funding and also requests for funding at a future town meeting. Balliet said that the trustees plan to prepare an article for May's annual town meeting seeking design money. The most current estimates put the cost of design at approximately $4.1 million. With that money in hand, he said a capital fundraising team composed of 2 trustees, 2 members of the Friends of Snow Library, and a member of the community will be able to begin raising money for the project. There's already a small amount of money that's set aside towards this project, Balliet said. I think that's having not gotten the grant, the more emphasis will be placed on the ability to raise an increasing amount privately. The request for design funds will be following in May in 2026 for another ask to fund construction of a new library, which is expected to cost approximately $42 million. The grant, if awarded, could have covered close to half that cost. Trustees and other library advocates have been made a strong push for a new library in recent years. Town meeting voters approved funding or studies related to the effort in 2023 and 24, while public funds have been held to educate the community on what a new library would mean for the community. We've had a strong backing from the public to move ahead, and we feel this is a priority for many people living in the town of Orleans, said Balliet, noting that 77,000 people visited the library last year. Snow Library is not just a library. It's a cultural center. It's a community center. It's a place for people to gather and interact with each other. And that's all the time we have today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll be here next week.